Good day. Uh, Today I'm going to be talking about chapter 9 classes. So, for this first class here, we have a class named restaurant, and we've basically assigned this init method. What it does is it basically automatically initializes instances, right, within your class. So we have self, restaurant name, and cuisine types as parameters. Self basically is referring to the instances. Restaurant name and cuisine type as parameters are basically storing the arguments that are going to be passed to these parameters. So basically these arguments over here in this instances, right? So we have these instance variables here, self, using self, and then we store the parameters within these instance variables because they contain the values passed to them. Then we have this method over here which describes the restaurant, and we basically just use these variables and pass them into the string, so it's basically displayed there. And whatever values are contained here in these instance variables are basically printed over here. Same with open restaurant, it's shown here with this method basically prints the name of the restaurant over here with this whole string. Then basically I created this instance basically, both of them, my restaurant and your restaurant, and it has these values contained within parentheses, and these values are basically passed to the arguments here. The parameters, but we know these parameters are stored within these variables, self.restaurant name and the cuisine type, and basically when it's shown here, it shows the value in the final display of the print. Then we use the instances to basically access the variables, so we can print the final display here. And we also call the function describe restaurant in open restaurant, and when we do that, it basically the display is shown over here on the terminal. Tom's Tacos is too nice. The Tom's Tacos has fancy tacos as the best food, and it shows that it's now open. That's because we called these functions and we also used this print method here. And I went on to create this in this activity. Creating the class user basically explains the same thing with the init method. Describe user as a method and greet user, and passing the variables within the strings in order to print the final display. We have these instances that carry the values that are going to be passed to the parameters up there, and we basically just call the different methods and also use this print to print the variables. And when we do that, we see here the first on the list, John, with an awesome surname Mahlangu, and then it shows the first name, last name, and then it greets using the greet method over here. Calling the greet method, it greets the person with his name. Then I went on to modify this user class over here in this activity. So basically, first modification I made is by adding this fixed variable, self.login attempts, and I assigned 0 as a fixed value to it. And essentially, after that, I created an increment method called increment login attempts, and it has self in the parentheses. And basically what it does is it increments the login attempts, which is set by 0. It increments it by 2, right? And so because it increments it by 2, then it will show basically that the user has made 2 login attempts, right? And but in this case here, I basically called the increment method 3 times using the user one instance. So for John Mahlangu, basically what's gonna happen is his login attempts is actually gonna be 6 because I called the increment 3 times, and it's basically incremented by 2, so it shows login attempt 6. Then I also added this fixed variable, self.login attempts equals to 0. What that does is it just resets the login attempts in the display back to 0. So it says login attempts of the reset 0. So yeah, and essentially I do the same thing for user 2, same thing for user 3 over here. Then here we have this class restaurant, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to combine 2 classes together. We have ice cream stand, which is this new class we're making, and we're gonna basically we're gonna put restaurant class here as a parent class in parentheses. Reason being is because we wanna use the restaurant class within the ice cream stand class. So how we'll do that is firstly make the init method for ice cream stand with its designated parameters over here, as well as self, right? And then using super with parentheses dot init, we're gonna call the restaurant, we're gonna call the method in the restaurant class. Hence why we also don't put the self parameter within the parentheses here, because self is already there in the restaurant class within the parameters. So within the parentheses, sorry, as a parameter. So we don't need to put self over here because we're calling it. It's already made. Then here basically I just assigned the flavors list to the self.flavors instance attribute. So self.flavors will basically contain this list of ice cream flavors in it. Reason being is because we want to loop in it. We want to loop through the list. So within this method, display flavors, what happens is we're going to print the restaurant name, and we're going to use the for loop to loop through the list over here that is passed in this instance over here. This list basically is the third argument, and we know that the third argument will basically be passed to the third parameter as flavors up here in the init method. And because it's passed to flavors and we assigned flavors to self.flavors, then basically when we print that, then it displays the list over here of ice cream flavors. And we basically just call the display flavors method, and when you call it, it shows a list of the ice cream flavors that will loop through over here. So yeah, that's the basic understanding of classes and what I did. When it comes to imports, so over here I created 3 files, right? I have electric car, and battery, and I'm going to use import within the electric car, not within this electric car file, right? I'm basically going to import the car method, well, the class car with its method and the class battery with its method. I'm going to import it to this file over here, which is the electric car file. Reason being is because we want to use the classes within those other files. So here I say from car, right, which is the file, import the class, which is car, and I basically renamed it using alias as C. And then from battery, which is the file, import battery, which is the class, and I rename it to B. And then over here I have my class, which is electric car, and because I imported the car class and I renamed it to C, I can actually use it as a parent class over here in the electric car class. So because I'm using it here, it's because I imported it. So I have my init method over here, and yeah, the init method is for electric car, right? and it has 3 parameters, of course, and a self parameter as well. And then this basically is calling the it's basically calling the method, the init method from the car class, which is here, right? And it's able to do that because I imported it into this file. And yeah, assigning the battery to self.battery, and then basically calling this function full gas tank, and displays this message: this car cannot take gas because it's not an electric car. And then this instance over here was also created. So yeah, so that's basically with importing the different files. We're using these 3 different files. Then there's also this import here, where basically just importing a pre-existing module, right? Random, and you importing the method randint. This basically randomizes a number between 2 numbers, let me say. So basically, when you call the randint function, it randomizes a number between 1 and 6, right? So when I call this, it chooses a number between 1 and 6, and it's a randomized number. And then also here, because we imported choice, you print the choice function as well, and it shows the display here. So yeah, that's basically it for classes, basic summary of classes. And yeah, that's chapter 9.